Hey, what's up, YouTube? So today we are going to do front brake pads and rotors on a 2001 Buick Lesabre. What would be another Blazer Guide 1983 video without the rain looking like it's going to come through. So I have this little tarp. So it's either going to rain or the battery's going to die a fourth of the way through. It's typically how it works around here. So first thing we're going to do is we've got the vehicle jacked up, supported with jack stands. We're going to go ahead and just zip this wheel off, and then we're going to go ahead and just get into it. We're going to do the pads, the front rotors, and the hardware clips on the actual caliper bracket as well, which are included with the Wagner thermoquiet pads that I got. So let's go ahead and get these off. These are 19 millimeter. Somebody over tighten it. Okay. Let's take that off. Make the tire off. I'm going to set the wheel up here out of the road. Okay, and now what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and just take the caliper off the bracket. This will give us the access that we need to the actual brake pads so that we can compress the piston, and then we'll take the actual caliper bracket off from the back of the steering knuckle here in order to gain access to the rotor. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get the wheel turned out, and this way it'll give us a little bit more access to these fasteners in which we're trying to get to. So I'm going to shut it off and then come right. So now we're back. I'm going to go ahead and zip these out. The caliper bracket, or I'm sorry, the caliper bolts, which also act as the sliders too, so we're going to clean them up too. They are 15 millimeter. Let me see if I can do them with an impact just to speed up the process here. You should never run these down with an impact, because this is just aluminum and it will just destroy it. So taking them out won't hurt nothing, but you should always run them down by hand. They got slider pins here. That brought the inside rubber, but that's okay. I do believe they're different lengths on some vehicles. I'm going to sit them in a way that I know which one's top and bottom, just for simplicity. So I'm going to take the caliper off here. One other thing I'm going to do too, just to make things a little easier, I'm going to go ahead and zip off the, and you don't have to do this, but there's a bracket right here that holds the brake light. I'm taking this off just for simple purposes of giving the caliper a little bit more wiggle room here. I'm just pushing the caliper piston in a little bit there just so it'll come off a little easier. Set that aside. And as you can see, these brake pads, I think you can see these brake pads are pretty worn down here. Take them out. Okay. Take the hardware kit off. Okay, let's take a look here. Now these back fasteners, I believe they're also 15, which they are. That's going to make life a lot easier. That was cute. Okay. And there's your rotor. This is also a good time when you're in here to inspect your CV shaft, make sure the boot's okay and everything, which it looks good to be good. So that's in good shape, so that's good. And also check your hose, look for any cracks that might be in it. Looks like it's in good shape. And we're also going to go ahead and check the tie rod. Tie rod's nice and tight, so everything looks good. So now we're going to go ahead and move on and do the cleaning up of the actual caliper bracket here. And we're going to take it in. We're going to use a file on this to help clean this up. So we're going to go in the garage and do that now, and also clean up the slider pins. Alright, so I got the caliper bracket here, as you can see, in a vise. So what I'm going to do is you really got to clean up these mating areas where the hardware goes. The reason why this is so important, especially in this area, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you get a lot of, like, basically what I guess they consider rust jacking. It'll cause the hardware to squeeze, and it'll put pressure on the pad ears, and when it does that, then the pad can't move freely, and then your brakes hang up. So I'm just taking a square file here, and I'm going to clean it up the best I can, get any rust off it. These aren't too bad because my dad drives a lot, so usually he only gets about a year out of brake pads. This gets the big stuff down. I'm going to go over this with a wire wheel here shortly. This is just to get some of the big chunks off and the thick rust. Sometimes using just a wire wheel kind of just buffs the rust. It doesn't really take it off. So you want to kind of go after it with an aggressive file. You can also use a sandblaster too, as long as you don't damage these boots or anything here. Sometimes you want to take the rubbers off. So that's good enough. So now I'm going to take a drill just with a wire wheel. This will help just get some of the loose stuff off. This side. Try not to do what I just did and hit your rubber. A lot easier if I had a wire wheel or a bench grinder with a wire wheel. It's very important to do this step though, because like I said, especially even if you don't live in a rust belt, I would still do this just for sheer simple fact that, you know, if you don't, you start running into a situation where you get brake dust and grime and corrosion can build up in your area, if not just rust all over. So, super organized garage here. So I try to get the prepping done of the caliper bracket here in the garage. Just clean it off, get some of the excess brake dust off it. I got one of these catch pans here. Alright, so all I'm doing right now is just cleaning out the slider pinholes with some brake clean. And this way, get a semi-clean rag here. This way, when I go to grease everything, it'll be nice and clean. Still recording? That's a miracle. I guess I should check to make sure you're actually in the frame here so you can actually see what I'm doing. Sort of. There we go. Just drying up the excess of brake grease here. Check your boots, make sure they're good. can also hit it with some compressed air too. That'll help clean them out. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab the brake pads here. And like I said, the particular pads I chose, these are the Wagner Thermo Quiets. See if they have a part number on them here. I think that's focusing. That's the part number. Got them on Amazon. They're on sale for, I think, 15 bucks. Ceramic. They're normally like $37 shoes, I believe, or brake pads, I should say. So what I'm going to do now, I get my hardware out. I'm just inspecting to see if they're all the same, and they appear to be all identical. Some of them are inner, some of them are outer. I'll set these aside here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, hopefully it's not MIA like everything else around here. I'm going to grab some of this. This is the Ultra Brake Parts lubricant that I use by Permatex. Ew, excuse me. And I'm going to also grab the slider pins here. I'm going to clean them up. Make sure they're nice and clean. I'm going to apply fresh lubricant to them too. If they have any rust or anything on them, you want to clean them up while you're here. I'm going to set them aside. Do this one. Okay, so I'm going to put them aside. They're nice and clean. So what I'm going to do now is, and this is what I call the Eric O method, is I'm going to take some of this grease here, and this helps to keep the brake pads from basically getting squeezed by the hardware. I'm just going to take a little bit of grease. I'm going to put it inside here. I'll clean. I was putting a little bit too much on here, but I'll clean the rest up with my finger here in a second. I'm just trying to get it applied to the other side. This grease is like coagulated. Okay. So I'm going to put that in there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of clean it up a little bit, because you don't want too much on it, because you don't want it to get on all of your new brake rotor. Grease and brakes don't mix, typically, depending on where you're putting it, of course. And I found that this really helps. Like I said, I learned this method from watching South Main Auto videos, and it seems to really do the trick, especially like even here in Pittsburgh, where we get a lot of rust and stuff from the salt and the snow and all that good jazz. Alright, oh, that looks pretty good. Okay, now that's done. Alright kids, we're back. So what we're going to do now is I got my caliper bracket all ready to go with my pads on it, my new mounting hardware. And then we can always put these back on in a minute. It's not a big deal. Got my rotor cleaned up to get rid of any of the packing grease that they put on it. What we're going to do is we're just going to clean up the mounting face for the back of the rotor here. We're going to do so by using this little whizzy wheel. We're going to clean up the hub face just to get any rust off it here. So do that. Before we go any further, I'm going to get a wire wheel and just get around where I couldn't get. Okay, so 3M makes this really nice tool. It helps you. I don't even think this is going to fit in there. That's kind of a waste of time. 3M kind of makes this tool that helps you get in here. Now this hub was replaced not long ago, so it's actually not too bad. This looks like just brake grime, so it's not even really rust. So I'm just going to use the flathead to clean up. But anyway, they have this tool that allows you to go over the actual lug nut stud. I may pick up a set of them. I think Amazon, once again, saves the day. Try to get some of that buildup off of there. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you also don't want the rotor to be riding on here crooked, because then you'll be getting uneven brake wear as well as pulsation. So let's clean out a little bit of the brake clean. Alright, and then I'm going to hit it with a semi-dirty rag instead of using the one I use to clean the brake rotors. Oh, that works beautifully. Okay. Just kind of clean up the face here. This might not seem like that important. Some people just slap it on here and not even care, but it is kind of important to have this clean. Okay. So now we are good and ready, just about ready for the new rotor. Alright, gorgeous. I think we're pretty good there. I don't know if I can get it. Alright, that should be good enough. Been watch 3 hours of me cleaning a hub face here. Alright, so now you can do what you want on this end. I like to put grease on here to help keep the rotor from sticking for future brake jobs. Now, the best thing probably to use would be like a fluid film, I would suggest. I'm just going to use some spray silicone because I don't have fluid film, and just kind of, just kind of give it a little bit of a coating here. It may be useless, may not be, not really sure, but it makes me feel better. Give my rotor one last clean just in case I got some of that silicone overspray on it. Alright, now I go ahead and pop the new rotor on here, like so. Again, I don't know if these lug nuts have the ability to get on here and really hold that in place. Put the lug nut on backwards, that seemed to do it. Just to keep the rotor from dancing all over the place while you're trying to put everything back together. Alright, now we're going to take your freshly cleaned up bracket here, in which that we did the cleaned up the rust and mounting the hardware here, just making sure there's, I don't like any grease to actually be in the stainless steel hardware, because it actually can build up dirt from what I've seen and then restrict the pads too. So, alright, so that goes like that. Nope, hold on a minute. There we go, kids. First day of the rodeo here. Hardware looks good as far as the bolts that hold the bracket in, so I'm not going to bother doing anything with them. They're still, like I said, I just did a brake job on this like a year ago because, well, my dad likes to drive everywhere for no reason. Like, hashtag retired, I guess you would say. Drive me crazy. So now we're going to go ahead and bolt them down, get my air hose reconnected. Now this part you can do with an impact. Should also torque them to factory specs, obviously. I will actually go an extra step here in a minute and make sure they're tight. So I don't trust impacts for things like brakes. I like to give them an extra little snuggeroo just to make sure. Those are tight, good. Okay. Those are the, like I was saying before, those are just the fasteners back here, the 215s that hold the caliper bracket on. Alright, double check my pads don't have any junk on them, which they do not. This is the outer one because it does not have the squealer. Get that in there. Gorgeous. It's one pad. Like I said, from what I understand, if you want to put the one with the squealer, which is your wear indicator, I guess you would call it the correct name, on the inside. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's what I've always been told. Which I don't seem like it's very happy there, though. It seems like it's actually interfering with the... Interesting. It doesn't actually seem to be happy back there, oddly enough. When I put it in there, it interferes with the steering knuckles, so we're not going to do that on this one. But I've always understood that they go on the inside, but we're going to do the opposite, only because this vehicle, it's going to cause the pad to bind up is what it's going to do, and that's not going to be any good then. Yeah, see, the squealer here is open and free. On the back side, when I had the squealer, it was actually interfering with the inside of the bracket here, so it wasn't allowing the pad to move. So we're going to go outbound with the squealers on this, even though from what I've always been told they go inbound. The pads did all right. They didn't really last super long. They were from Detroit axle. Same with the rotors. Really wasn't all that thrilled. Probably won't order from them again, because like I said, they didn't really last very long. So just making sure I clean up any extra grease from my hands on here. Okay, everything looks good there. Now we're going to clean up the rotor here, or I'm sorry, the caliper. Yeah, the rotor. Jesus, losing it today, kids. Now let's do this. I should have did this before I mounted all this back up, just to keep all our new stuff clean. Okay, so before we do anything, we're going to go ahead and compress in the piston. I've already opened up the reservoir cap on the brake fluid, and that way it can allow the fluid to pass through. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to just use a giant C-clamp here. You guys see what I'm seeing? Probably not. Barely. Let's get you up a little bit so you can actually see it. Okay. It's about as high up as that camera wants to go. Okay, let's open up the C-clamp. Alright, and I just used the old pad. Now they have a tool that you can use for this, but I just choose to use the a C-clamp. Now, if you have the twist-in style, like on a lot of GMs or on VWs that use the twist-in style rear pistons, you have to get the tool. Don't even bother trying this. It's not even worth your time trying to use that little hand thing. You also can't just push it in either. You gotta twist them in. So these ones here are just your standard ones here. And I'm getting a little air pocket there, which is okay. I'll use a little pick. You want to make sure your boot on your piston of your caliper doesn't get any air pockets in it. So I'm going to burp that out here in a minute. But first, let me clean it up real fast. Okay, so I'm just going to use this drill wire wheel to clean up the inside of the caliper ears. Here, if I can get it to stay put. Try not to catch the rag, like I just did. Looks pretty good. Okay, hit it with some brake clean. Like that. Drip dry. Okay. Now we're going to try to get this air out of the boot here. There we go. Alright, so now what you want to do is you want to apply some grease to the back of the ears here. This helps keep from rust buildup and rust jacking, but it also keeps the noise down as far as squealing. And put some on the back of the piston face if we can. Doesn't have to be a lot, you just need enough to get on there and help lubricate it so it doesn't shimmy around and make all kind of noise. Alright, here. This is just to keep it from rusting. Okay, so now we're just about ready to put the caliper back on now. We got it compressed in, got it cleaned up, got everything lubricated. We already got our pads in place. So I'm going to see where you guys are looking. I'm going to get them right there. Make sure your hose isn't twisted up. Everything's moving good. And then what you got to do is guide it on there, and you got to push your little rubbers in here. Make sure they don't get pinched. And get your sliders back in there. Those are in. I'll get these one, bottom one back in. They're all pre-lubricated, so they're ready to go.
We're going to get a little bit of rain here.
Yeah, I know. Very well aware of that. Okay, so we're going to stop there for just a minute. Okay, I apologize. My battery went dead on my camera, so I got a little carried away just trying to get done. But basically, where I left off was I was going ahead and putting in the slider pins fasteners back in that holds the actual caliper on. Basically, just grease those up, make sure that you're not pinching your little rubber boots in there. Screw them down to factory specs. Like I said, in the back you have, I don't know if I'm going to get it. Let's see if I can get my hand on it. In the back here, you have the caliper bracket. There's one there, and there's one right there, which is for holding the actual bracket on for the caliper. So went ahead, cleaned up the rotors, cleaned up the rotors with some brake clean, got those cleaned up, got the pads down, sat this back down, used a little pick to carefully, without ripping it, work out the little air bubble that was in the boot there on the piston. Just worked around it, and also went ahead and did a replacement brake line. That brake line was looking pretty rough. I didn't film that because, like I said, this battery, it's getting sent back on eBay. It's not working real good on this camera, but got that NICOP, which is $20 for 3/16 knockoff NICOP brake line on Amazon, free shipping if you have Prime. So and that comes up here, and that goes down to the actual ABS module. Right there, as you can see, the new shiny line compared to the other ones. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. I'm not going to film that because obviously that's the exact same process as this. All you really need is, like I said, a decent C-clamp, 15mm. You can do this with basic sockets. You don't have to have impacts like I do, but it definitely helps tremendously. And you know, like I did clean up the face of the hub for the bearing hub there. Make sure there's no rust or anything that would cause any kind of unevenness when you mount the rotor back on. Make sure, like I said, these are nice and tight. You don't want to over tighten these with air impact tools. It will strip out the threads on the inside of the bracket there. Just hand tight. Use your mind, not your muscle, is what a lot of guys say, just so that you don't tear the threads out on that. But other than that, it's not a hard job, really easy. You know, I went ahead and sent my 10mm back in and tightened the hose back down. So all's well. I'm just going to put a little bit of grease on there, just keep the wheel from getting any corrosion build up, and go ahead and throw this back together, and we're all done. Make sure you pump up your brakes before you actually pull out, because if you don't pump up your brakes, you'll quickly realize that you didn't. Also check your brake fluid too. I need to add just a little bit there too, because I had to bleed them when I replaced the brake line there. So thanks for watching. I hope this video helps somebody out.